Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District. And it's a mouthful. It took me about 6 months to learn it. But so again, referencing back to Yule Anderson and myself, we are members. I'm the chairperson for the Upper Old Holy Basin Area Council. Yule is one of our board members. And we're going to be eliciting applications for people that would like to join our Basin Area Council.
Unless they fired me, I'm still.
You're still on it. Yeah.
Hope so. You got to reapply every 2 years. So
you got to reapply.
Yeah.
But, coming up. Great people. A plethora of research that is going on in Metro Atlanta. So I'm going to let Danny have the floor and talk to you about all this water stuff.
Thank you, George. And thank you, Tom, for having us here and including us on the agenda. Again, I'm Danny Johnson. I'm the director of the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District. And with me today is...
I'm Celine Benoit. I'm the Senior Water Efficiency Planner for the district.
Yep. So we both work at the Atlanta Regional Commission, which staffs and executes the work of the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District. Has anybody ever heard of the Metropolitan North Georgia Water Planning District? Raise your hand. Okay. All right, a few people. We were founded back in 2001 by the state legislature in an effort to create a planning organization for water, how we manage our water in Metro Atlanta, which includes half the state's population and was rapidly growing at the time and still is, and creating a universal plan that integrates water, wastewater, and stormwater planning and unifies the codes on how we manage our water and stormwater and land use such that the 111 jurisdictions of the metro area are working from the same playbook for how we manage water. So if you work at the city or county government level, the codes you have on the books today related to floodplains, stormwater management, most of them come from required codes that are required by the Metro Water Planning District. Things we do is we look out for forward-looking forecasts for water demands for all of our counties, how much wastewater we need to meet that growing population, and how much stormwater management we're going to need for the future. And one of the things that we do is we have a lot of work in water conservation and water efficiency, and Celine leads that program, and I oversee the overall work of the group. So we're here today to talk about data centers, and I noticed Georgia Power has already left the building. I was hoping to have more of a dialogue, but oh well, we'll continue.
We know where they live, and we have their number.
We do, and they're fine people. I don't envy the challenge that they have. Data centers are not their idea. You can't blame them for data centers. Data centers are an opportunity that has provided the technology space and AI development that has just skyrocketed exponentially over the last year. And everybody's trying to get a piece of it. So how do you blame anybody for going after their American dream and building a data center and making bukus of money that is available in that market right now? It's a very lucrative market to be in. If anybody here owns stock, if you look at the 10 largest capital investment stocks on the market right now, 7 of the 10 are all in on data centers or some type of framework on that data center future. So it's here to stay, and whether or not it comes here to Atlanta, Rockdale County, or anywhere else in Georgia, it's going to be all over the world, really. It actually is growing all over the world. So the work we've done today is we've done a lot of research on the trends for water demands for data centers, and we're trying to be smarter about how do we educate our local officials on these trends that we're seeing, because some of them can have very, very high amounts of water demand to cool these centers that are processing lots and lots of data and information. It takes cooling power to keep them operating at an optimum level. So Celine's going to talk a little bit about some of the background on what we've been researching over these last 8 months, really, and some of the trends we've seen in Metro Atlanta. And then
recording in progress.
I'll chime in from here and there, but I'm going to let her take it over and carry on.
Thank you, Danny. Good morning, everybody. So data centers. Let's just start from the very beginning. What is a data center? We're hearing a lot about them, we're reading a lot about them, but some of us might literally not know what they are. They're housing for IT infrastructure. This is everything from filing, storage, to how those emails are stored and put around, as well as, you know, when we're on YouTube looking up how to plant a tomato garden or looking up those cat videos. And so historically, we've been seeing data centers and almost no data centers as what is termed as a co-location site. Now, co-location types of data centers are these stagnant housing of files. Like, we're this organization, we need to save these files, they need to be housed here in this data center. But now we are seeing this shift to what is being called hyperscaler data centers. So hyperscalers are really taking a 360 to these former co-location sites. When we hear hyperscalers, we really need to think about those really big companies out there, such as our Googles, our Microsofts, our Amazons. And that is because they are primarily housing a lot of artificial intelligence, another word we've been hearing a lot about. So this is the learning modeling, computational modeling. And what's different about them, so how we had these co-location sites that were just the housing and storage, AI, when we're typing in those prompts or interacting with that interface, is actively pulling from all over the internet almost simultaneously. So you can think that the computational demands for file storage, which was that kind of stagnant, versus the needs for artificial intelligence, which is happening instantaneously, those demands for artificial intelligence are much higher than what we've traditionally seen with our file storage for these data centers. So data centers, they're not a new thing. They've been around for decades. They've been around for decades in Metro Atlanta. But as Danny mentioned, and as Georgia Power mentioned, is that we're seeing them very rapidly within these past few years. And that's because more and more of them are not these co-location sites, but these hyperscalers that have these increased demands. And that is being driven largely by AI's needs. And so with these increasing computational demands, we can also expect to see an increase on those power needs and in turn those water needs. And so we can't think of the old way for data centers. We really need to think and approach them with this new way of these increased computational demands. These data centers, they're machines. They're running 24/7. While we're sleeping, they're still running. And in order to maintain optimal operations, they need to be cooled within a very strict temperature range. If they fall out of these temperature ranges, they can have significant damage to their hardware, known as fatal heat. So obviously these companies that are developing and housing these hardwares and IT infrastructure is going to want to make sure that they're protecting their own investment by making sure that these machines are running optimally and continue to run optimally, but not only for themselves and their own investments, but also for their customers who they're providing this instantaneous resource to. So in order to maintain this optimal temperature, we do need cooling technologies. So previously with data centers, we've seen with the co-location sites, this kind of air cooling, which was just, kind of thinking like an air conditioner that just went through the room and just covered the space. But with these hyperscalers and these increasing computational demands, there is a shift in how this cooling technologies are also being installed. And that's because these new cooling technologies are able to go almost within the hardware and the technologies themselves to provide very niche cooling, again, to make sure that these machines are continuously running within those optimal temperature ranges to protect their investment and make sure that their customers' needs are being met 24/7. So with this new type of cooling, there's some more efficient cooling and there's some less efficient cooling that we are seeing proposed and being put into these data centers. There's a type of technology called closed-loop cooling, where the water is recycled through the system and within concentrations, and again, is using that water more efficiently. But we are also seeing some examples, for example, evaporative cooling, where it's just that the water is evaporating and we're losing it from our system and it's not being returned to our own system and our own region's water supplies. So it's important for us, as Danny mentioned, these data centers are not going anywhere, they're going to keep coming. So it's important for us when we're having these conversations and beginning these plannings with these data centers that we're having these conversations with them and saying, okay, what are your needs for energy and for water? What kind of cooling technologies do you plan to put into these systems? Are they the most efficient ones? Are they the best ones for our region and for our water supply? So we are having these conversations with our members within the district. Of course, like Danny mentioned, we're 15 counties and 96 cities. We have these data centers popping up across our metro district region. So we're making sure to work with our communities so that they are informed, so that they can make informed decisions when they're negotiating and talking with these data centers.
And a little bit more about what we're seeing across the landscape is data centers want to be where the population is because it reduces that time of response. When somebody calls up something on the internet wants, whoever's developing the background of this wants to have that speed as fast as it can be. And so they want proximity to fiber optic networks. And a lot of those fiber optic networks are located along railroad corridors. And so you might see a lot of these bigger data centers trying to be near railroad corridors. Along with that, if they were to go, if you were to say, well, go down somewhere else away from a metro area, the speed it takes to go from a very rural area to the population, it does not meet their needs. And so that's why you're seeing them trying to be where the people are. So if they're not here in a metro Atlanta, they're going to go to some other major population centers and try to be on those major fiber optic hubs. What we're seeing is they're also, as Georgia Power was saying, is they're looking for cheap and available land. And what we're seeing is the trend of these are mostly right now across that southern arc of the metro area where there's available land. And so we're seeing them in Douglas County, Fayette County, some now in Rockdale. Henry County's getting some requests. But our biggest approach right now is making sure that when someone approaches a planning commission or a development department, that the first questions aren't just where's your land and is it available? It's let's talk to the water authority or our water department and make sure that this company's going to have, whether we're going to have water supplies available to meet their cooling needs. Because water is not something that you can just go expand like you can a coal-fired plant and crank it up higher. We have a very precious water supply source in Metro Atlanta. Our whole metro area is at the top of a hill that drains down to the rest of the state. So we do not have the Great Mississippi River or the Ohio River to just pull infinite amounts of water to meet cooling needs and to allow us to continue to grow as a region. We have to protect the water that we have. And our metro water utilities, we have almost 50 water utilities in Metro Atlanta. They each have a supply available to them. And if a data center is coming in and taking a big chunk of that future available supply, it's less available supply to manage the continued growth of that community. So they have to be aware if that data center wants to put in an evaporative cooling system, it's going to use a lot of water. If they're going to go closed loop cooling, like Celine said, it doesn't have as much water demand, and maybe they can look at that as an opportunity.
Would that be recycling? I guess?
It's recycling. Think about how your cooling system works at home. You have a continuous loop, and it's a compressor, and you have a coolant in there. Well, similarly, you can do that with cooling for data centers. It requires more power. So there's never an easy answer. It's always a give and take. But if you don't have sufficient water supplies, you can't continue to do evaporative cooling, which is the most efficient method for cooling these things.
That would be the cooling towers.
Cooling towers. Yeah, if you think about a cooling tower, you see that mist coming off the top? That's taking a liquid, passing it over a hot something, chips in this case, computers, and evaporating it so that it takes that heat away in a very efficient manner. And that's why most of them want to do evaporative cooling first as their first option, because it's the cheapest technology, it's the most efficient. But if you don't have the water supplies, you have to look at alternatives if you're going to build a big data center.
I mentioned to the power company, what I've seen, there's four sizes: small, medium, large, and huge. Is there a water requirement in gallons per day been issued to each one of those? Or is it
Jim,
totally depends on something
it's a
different?
good question. Yes, there is a range, and
There's
it
a
goes from
range.
low to high.
Yes,
You can- yeah.
but there is no standard. We're not expecting when we hear a hyperscaler is proposing a development, we're not, okay, we're expecting to hear this from them. No, it really does depend. But these hyperscalers, their water demands are much higher.
Seems like that's something that we would, if the developer comes in for a data center, it seems like he's almost going to have to go to RWR and say, I'm going to need X.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
So how do we determine what that X is based upon, is going to be based upon the number of units they've got in the building, or?
And the technology,
cooling,
the
yeah.
technology cooling that they choose.
Mhm.
And that's a give and take conversation with RWR, Rockdale Water Resources, to have that conversation so they can design their system appropriately. But they cannot get water unless they get a signed off commitment from the water utility that it's available to them.
How clean does it have to be?
Some of them can do recycled water, which might be slightly less quality than a potable drinking water, but generally it's got to be pretty clean because you don't want it fouling up the system that it's going through. Yes.
Yeah, I was about to say along those lines. I know I'm on the Chattahoochee Basin Advisory Council.
Mhm.
We had that meeting in Douglas County with their water authority. They were speaking, and they were talking about
Yes.
actually, I think they were piping in Cobb County's reused water to service things in Douglas. I mean, there's different interconnected ways,
Yeah.
but they are trying to utilize the reused water from their water treatment plant that obviously would just go back into the river. And I'm sure there's calculations that are involved in that to put a certain amount back in the river.
Yes.
But instead piping that into these facilities so they're not using treated water that would be coming out of our faucet. They're using the reused water from a treatment plant.
That's right. Reclaimed water use can be a local engineering solution to a water supply problem. But if we look at it from a larger regional standpoint, any water that's evaporated is lost to our downstream neighbors.
Regardless, it's still going away.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a range. Can you just,
Yeah.
for people in the room, can you say
Definitely.
Is it 1,000 gallons a day? Is it 1,000,000 gallons a day? Is there some range that we can start?
What we have seen proposed from these is some of the smaller ones that are not the AI centers,
Yeah.
the small the storage co-location facilities might be on the order of 15,000 gallons a day, which is within the realm of that's normal. That's a good customer for a water utility. They can get, nationally, we've seen the larger hyperscaler centers on the 1 million gallons a day, 2 million gallons a day, and on the super mega ones, when they talk about those being 3 or 4 million gallons a day. Now, we haven't heard anything like that in Georgia yet, but we have to be conscious and aware. If someone proposes a 1 gigawatt data center, there's going to be a large water demand with it, and we need to be aware and having those conversations with the local utility, the local elected officials, to understand what is it that we're saying yes to. There's a very large tax incentive for local officials to say yes to these. They don't create many jobs. It's always a good question. How many jobs do these create? They create the desire is that tax incentive, that local tax.
Real quick, I'm sorry, on that number you just threw out there,
Mm-hmm.
a typical water treatment plant produces.
So I forget what the current Rockdale water permit. He's not here. I think he already left.
We're processing
Yeah.
8.1 million gallons a day.
There you go.
So you're talking some of those larger things using an eighth of the water production from a facility for the whole.
If they were in Rockdale, we've not heard of one. Yeah.
They're not here yet.
Yeah.
For perspective, that's a very, very, very large water use.
That's the average size of the data centers that are going in the metro area right now.
They vary.
It varies.
The most recent news.
I would be cautious to try and apply a standard to
Yeah.
all of them. They're
different.
different.
Yeah.
Because I would say the larger ones, they understand this. They don't scare me at all because they know exactly the footprint they're going to occupy, how much power they need. They know that they need to get in touch with the water authority and make sure that that's there. What I think, and you could talk to this too, I get 3 or 4 calls a week. 95% of them are not serious. It's a middle guy trying to find, hey, I found some property on Google Maps. It looks like it's adjacent to this substation over here. How much power can I pull out of there? Well, almost everything we've got, you could do a smaller industry anywhere. how big are you talking about? Well, they don't even know. Maybe it's 50 megawatts, maybe it's 100, maybe I could sell it. They're just trying to package land and power and water in a good
Yeah.
spot and then go find Amazon or Google or whoever and try to sell that. And I think that's ginning up a lot of stuff. The Amazons and the Googles and the Microsofts know exactly what they're doing. Probably not going through a middle guy. You're probably not going to know they're there until they buy land. Because if you know they're coming, the property values are going to, everybody wants 10 times what it's worth because it's Amazon or Google or Microsoft. But they know, now I've got to figure out, can I get power there? Can I get water? And they've got people on their payroll that are ex-power people, that are ex-water people. I mean, they've got expert knowledge there. So they understand what they're doing, and it is a huge impact on the community to be able to pull that off.
Well, there's one thing that concerns me, that, we'll see from the planning commission side or from just from the planning development side. You get a company that's come in and authorized and built X size, let's say it's a small size, but they've left enough room for expansion.
Mm-hmm.
They start out with X number of gallons per day, but it's going to grow.
Mm-hmm.
How does RWR know if they're going to be able to supply that amount of water, which will change as it grows?
There are some that are providing that information in the development. They say, okay, we have multiple phases for expansion, and they're including that information, those requests in the initial plan. Obviously, we can't say that for everybody. We don't know. But there are some that are providing that information.
Seems like it would be a requirement. I mean, almost, put it in the contract. We will, ask for this number of gallons per day with the potential of going up to. Just so the water supplier has got an idea of what's going to be up front.
So the water supplier has a lot of control. They set the meter that is sized appropriately. So if the first meter is set as like a 3-inch meter to just provide a small amount of water for what they are now, the data center is going to have to ask for that meter to be increased. And at that point, they could say, no, we don't have that capacity available to you. We're not going to sell it to you. So
That's the same on the electric side as well.
Yeah.
I mean,
It needs to be
substations
controlled
and things
properly.
and transformers are sized
Yep.
appropriately, and if you wanted to upscale, great, but we got to talk.
yeah. The other concept here that we're seeing is that if you look in the news, you find a company like Prologis. Everybody heard of Prologis? They are a logistics company, a lot of trucking facilities, a lot of those big box truck substation. What do you call it? Logistics centers.
Logistical centers, yeah. Terminal.
If you look at their new business plan, they are looking to get into the data center game, transitioning some of their existing facilities to data centers because they have the rooftop already built. You can just go in and repurpose it. So that's something that we're eyeing, and it's easier entry for them. They still have to ask for the substation to be built. So there's no, just because you have a big box that you can just go put a data center in it. You still have to have this infrastructure available to you. So it's just something we're watching.
Danny, did you have any PowerPoint slide or anything else? I know you had some in the past, but you're okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just to let y'all know, Mr. Benoit had to leave on a water emergency, and he's our water manager of the operations out at the water plant. But we do have, your name again? Tracy Miller, that's right. And you are water compliance. So she's here from RWR, so she's hearing all this, and I just told her we opened up Pandora's box.
Yeah.
But also elected officials. Tawana Smith will be our new Post 1 commissioner in Rockdale County, January 1. So she's here looking at all of this from an elected official standpoint. Okay. Kevin Hanna, the director for Conyers Rockdale Economic Development Council, was to be here today, but he had a previous commitment. So again, we're sharing these very high level of exposure. So we wanted to make sure that we could get as many citizens and business entities here and concerned folks, so we have good first-hand knowledge regarding water consumption and power utility consumption for data centers.
Tracy, have you anything jump out at you so far that?
Just to piggyback a little bit off of what he said, I am former administrative coordinator in the engineering department. And a lot of what he's saying, is correct. It starts with, planning and development. Just because somebody comes in and buys 50 acres of land and puts a little bitty something there, and they need 2 or 3 inch meter to supply that water. If they decide they're gonna upgrade, they have to go back to planning and development and present all of this information all over again and say, we wanna expand. And then it has to be, sent through the engineers and so forth. Stormwater has a say in it, and they can approve or disapprove based on the infrastructure that's already in place, unless there's gonna be additional investment to, be able to accommodate that.
Would you be more comfortable if a initial application for a data center had a gallons per day listed so that you could approve on a certain amount? Would that make RWR more comfortable?
Well, I can't say that that would or would not, but we have had some that will come in and say, okay, we want 50 million gallons per day. But when they get ready to submit their applications and so forth to go through, what they will do is say, well, we're not going to develop all of it, but can we get it approved? We're only going to commit to 15 right now. Then they go from there. If they go through it in the initial, they'll already know whether they do or they don't from that perspective.
That's common, and I don't think that, I can't speak for water, but I know for the electric, if you come in and you're wanting 50, and then we get down to actually building it for you, you're like, well, we're just gonna run at 7 megawatts or 10 megawatts for the next few years. I'm not putting a transformer, I'm not putting the infrastructure in there to support 50, because I've gotta pay for all of that. Somebody's gotta pay for that. I'm gonna give you what you need right now. Come talk to me in 5-10 years when you're ready to expand, we can do that. I would think it's probably similar with water as well. If we overbuild infrastructure, the citizens and Snapping Shoals customers are the ones that are paying for that. So,
Well, I'd like to see the power company and the water department make that
I think we're all
in the
central
application
clearinghouse is
you know,
going to be Kevin
understood.
Hanna and the city approving all of this. We're working, whether it's Georgia Power or Snapping Shoals or Water Authority. I think everybody is working together with the development authority that's bringing this customer in. I love to serve them. It's not our decision whether we let them into the community or not. That's up to the county, the city.
Tammy, you have a comment?
Probably maybe another person who can answer this. The data center that's already here has been approved. They're gonna do, 1 building, and they have the option to add 2. Do we know what type of cooling system they were approved for?
It was not listed in the application for that.
There's a second data center that's being considered right now.
Western Sigmund?
Do we know what type of cooling system they're? So we approve something without knowing what type of cooling system?
It depends, obviously.
Okay.
But those are things that I would like the planning and development and the planning commission to be made aware of, in going into the application. Because we'll make a recommend. Our job as the planning commission is to make a recommendation for approval or denial based upon the facts that are given to us and how those facts tie into current zoning, infrastructure, et cetera. And if we don't have the correct information, I'll say, we may or may not make the right decision to deny or approve. The BOC's got the final okay, and it's our job to give a honest appraisal of what we think about it. So it's important to know these 2 factors.
If I can make any final plea, it's just that in that process, please heighten the communication with the water department and don't make them be 4th on the list for consideration of that impact.
It's not really a question, but for the DC blocks, their cooling system is a closed technology.
The one that's in place now?
Yes, for DC blocks. The one that is proposing right now, we're not totally sure.
I think it should be in the application. I need to go back and check.
Yeah, we'll check on that one, but DC blocks is a closed cooling system.
Closed loop.
Closed loop.
Very good. Well, thank you all so much for coming in and for